Night Terrors Detective Comics Issue 1, Dan Waters and Riccardo Federici. So, first off, the art is obviously very... That's just, if we're comparing this to Night Terrors Issue 2, the art is consistent and it is always very, very high quality. Let's just say that up front.
For sure. And this actually felt like a nightmare. Like, reading it. Like, Dan Waters does some really good setup of dream logic, where it felt very ethereal in parts.
I think Mark Waid had a slightly better handle of dream logic. Mm-hmm. I will say that this is one of the better written tie-ins that this entire event's had. I think it reads well, it flows, and it actually feels like a full story as opposed to just changing the location every 3 pages because it's a dream and we can. It feels like, no, we're setting up a status quo that Gordon, because it's a Jim Gordon story, that he's in. He's looking after this kid from the backups. Right? Sorrow, yeah. And it delves into a little bit, and I think there's even some red herrings where the book starts with he's looking at James Gordon Jr.'s grave, and it's going to be about him, and maybe he'll turn out to be something later, but at least so far it feels like no, it sets up its story, the art's really good, it's got atmosphere. I still think it suffers by the end a little bit from feeling like, I don't know, and this is really not this book's fault, it's more just the feeling of the event as a whole, where by the end, once there is more horrific things happening, I'm still just kind of feeling like, okay, it's still just a Night Terrors tie-in. It's as good as it is compared to a lot of the other ones.
But I want to give Waters credit here that he's trying something to tell a story about Jim Gordon as Batman and as this person of Gotham, right? Because there are pieces of the story that add up to, I can see what he wants to do, right? So you have, all the stuff with the people, that go... pray to these dark figures from the from the fifth dimension, right? And what they represent, and what that represents to Gordon as the former commissioner of the city. So I like all of that stuff.
Yeah, you've not established what's going on in the book yet. You just thrown out fifth dimensional figures. We have to set this up. So, so this story. It shows Insomnia kind of like moving the buildings around. It's probably the best Insomnia's looked actually in any of these books, as these like things where he looks really huge and he's like, moving the buildings around. But there's this unknown narrator saying we are being summoned, and you're like, who's this? Who is this talking? And it turns out to be these creatures from the fifth dimension, which in this world there's this like cult who are trying to summon them to Gotham. And Gordon is looking after this kid's sorrow. They end up, he senses something's going on and runs after this ritual that's happening, and these creatures show up and stuff happens, right? I think at least the way I read this, it sounds like these fifth dimensional creatures are not just part of a nightmare. It sounds like they're real fifth dimensional creatures, and that's why we're getting narration from them. Like them saying we are being summoned, and it shows you Insomnia playing with this nightmare world. It kind of implies that Insomnia is the one who's really summoned them into this nightmare.
Well, or what he's done by knocking out everybody, right? And making them fall asleep drew the attention of the fifth dimensional beings.
Yeah, or arguably maybe just the nightmare that Gordon's having. Like there's like parts of his mind that are summoning them. Either way, it didn't feel like they were just like made up parts of a nightmare. It felt like they were a real thing coming in outside from a nightmare. And that inherently made them more interesting than any other villain that's been in any of these nightmare like tie-ins. Right. So, like I think that's one of the reasons why it felt better and was definitely more enjoyable to read. Plus the art in these like fifth dimensional creatures, like it's horrific. They're like it's like one's like half a face and then just spiky bones underneath, and another one's got like stitching across its mouth. Like they look like I don't know. H.R. Giger spent a year in Mad Max and came up with these like stripped down versions of his monstrosities.
For sure. Did you get any like Hellraiser kind of vibes too?
Oh yeah, a little bit of Cenobite. Yeah.
There we go. I couldn't remember the name of those.
Yeah, little Cenobite. I can see that.
Right, from that realm.
Especially the summoning part, because it feels like they're being summoned like the Cenobites are.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's these three like people in like red masks who are summoning them, and it's because they think Gotham needs to be saved and they want the power from the fifth dimensional creatures to fix Gotham. And I've got a feeling one of them might turn out to be James Gordon Jr. just because of the setup at the start of the book.
Of the nightmare.
Yeah.
Of it all. But yeah, right, because they want, what was it, power,
wealth,
and knowledge.
Yeah, there you go. How's it?
Right. Which also, so when you look about it, it's also, to me, I read this as a criticism of Batman, right? From like Jim Gordon, right?
Oh, sure,
he doesn't,
yeah.
You know, because these are 3 things that Batman has, and they haven't fixed any of the problems in Gotham.
I don't think, like, obviously Gordon necessarily knows he's wealthy. Maybe he thinks he is.
No.
Because, you know.
Yeah, well, look at all the gadgets and stuff, right?
He's got a lot of stuff.
And just, even as his time as a Batman, which he touches on here, you know, he had all the backing of the, whatever program that was that turned him into Batman, too.
Yeah.
So, you know.
And let's be fair, that's the part that I didn't like as much towards the end.
Yeah.
There's this demonic version of Robo Bunny Batman that Gordon wore.
The Rookie.
Yeah. So, you know, I wasn't thrilled to see that. Although the idea of Gordon having to chase down this horrific version of Batman and himself is kind of interesting. But that's what happens ultimately. But the big thing that happens before that is that Sorrow gets killed. He gets incinerated by these fifth dimensional beings.
Yep.
And Gordon gets knocked out and he wakes up. And I love, like, this is a great writing technique. Dan Waters here, he's got like Gordon's narration saying sorrow, like once in each panel. And then Gordon says eventually it wasn't even just saying the name. He's literally just describing the feeling. You know, it kind of works both ways, and it was kind of a nice little little thing. Honestly, Gordon's voice in this is pretty good. Like, I like how early on he talks about how Barbara like just knows when to send him a text saying she cares about him. Like, you know, it's just he's always on the brink of breaking down because of everything that's happened to him.
But yeah,
you know, with his son, with the city, whatever it is. So I appreciated that.
Yeah. But yeah, just, you know, his nightmare of it being, you know, the things that he's failed the city and what he thought, you know, so that was the other thing that I took from it was the idea like you just can't throw knowledge, wealth, and power at Gotham and expect it to fix things, right? It takes more than that, and that's where he's kind of frustrated with, because like how can one man make a change in Gotham? But you know, Batman has, right? Like, you can argue if it was for good or for bad, and that's what the best Batman stories kind of are.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the thing that's missing here in this list is empathy, which is something that Batman and Gordon both have. And I think, you know, Gordon's seeing this version of like people who don't have that and just want the others. And not even that, they're not even earning the others. They're just trying to, like, you know, get them in a quick, you know, swoop.
Because he figures out, right, one of the people, she's the lady that starts coughing up the diamonds. Mm-hmm. Right? Is that how you took that too? Because I read this pretty late, so my brain wasn't at 100%. But he had figured out that she was maybe one of the people that had summoned these things.
Oh yeah, so because she coughed up the diamonds, and he talks a few times in the issue about the rich versus the poor of Gotham, and it kind of comes back into it when he realizes that these diamonds it leads them to this particular woman who lives in this, like, you know, fancy apartment building. And the other big thing towards the end of the issue that we've not really mentioned yet is that Gordon's hand starts cracking like it's made of glass or like porcelain, and as we get further in the issue and he's trying to stop the evil bat demon thing, the art here is gorgeous, but his hand starts to crack and smash more until he's almost lost it, and then eventually, you know, he does actually end up losing like a hand. You know, his leg starts to crack, but he goes to see this woman Angelica, and then there's diamonds all over the floor. She starts coughing up diamonds, and there's that great panel with the diamonds all coming out of her mouth. Yeah, which actually, so I said that the diamonds tracked her down. That's not true. The diamonds don't pop up until he gets to her. But he tracks her down. There's a piece of evidence. I can't remember what it was, but something led him to her. And, you know, he's trying to, you know, get her to cough up the diamonds, not to speak, because obviously the diamonds are going to cut her throat, right? And when he tries to, like, help her to, like, pull the diamonds out of her mouth, she bites off his 2 fingers. So he's lost 2 fingers. And that's basically the end of the issue. He's like sitting next to this woman who's now seemingly dead, as the narration from the 5th dimensional being starts coming back in. Because Gordon says, You can't fall apart, old man, however much you want to. Which again, the obvious metaphor being like Gordon has to keep himself together all the time, no matter all the chaos he's surrounded with. He's the straight man ultimately. And then the fifth dimensional being says, "Oh, but you can. We are glad to have given this gift to you, person of Gotham. You're the beginning to amuse us a little, at least." So that felt very Cenobite at the end. Was this like being smiling with that narration next to it? Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say this might be the best single tie-in issue of the entire month.
So far, yeah.
Well, it's the last week, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I did like the Shazam one a lot. That one was pretty good.
That was probably second best. I think
it's these two by a mile.
This one feels like it actually has a story though, and it feels like it's saying something about how Gordon views himself and views Gotham and views the world, and because of that, it actually feels like a good short story on its own. The fact that it happens to be kind of in a nightmare almost feels like it's not irrelevant, because obviously things are happening that wouldn't happen to him if it was like set in the the waking world, but it, like, I don't know, it has an actual story. It doesn't just feel like it's going through a series of random events from Gordon's past, which I think is the big thing here. So many of these tie-ins are just, here's a couple pages about this part of the character's origin, here's a couple pages about this part of their past. This isn't doing that. It's it's mentioned his past, it's relevant because it's happened to him, but it's actually telling a story. We've got these new characters who are interacting and playing with them. If anything, I'm just sad this is only going to be 2 issues, because I'm not sure if you can have as good a satisfying conclusion to this as that maybe I've got in my head, that in just 1 more issue. I'm not sure. I hope it is. I hope I like it.
Was Waters doing the backups with Gordon and Sorrow? Or was that Cy Spurrier?
I think it was Spurrier. Yeah, I don't think it was Waters.
Well, because jumping into there and the stuff with Sorrow and playing into that too, it feels, like Detective Comics still, because it's still familiar. I
appreciate it, though, until Gordon starts, like, cracking apart. There's nothing about this that says that it's a nightmare. I think that's another big thing here, is that all the other ones immediately start doing weird things.
Yeah.
This actually sets up the foundation of the world that he's in, and the context of what this story is, and it builds up before it starts to do anything weird. And I think that's a big part of it as well. So, yeah, I think this is easily the best tie-in of any of them. Even though it's referencing the Bat Bunny thing, and I don't like that Bat Bunny robot suit. I always hated it, but even with that, it's still the best tie-in.
But you have to appreciate how it's the villain in this. Then.
Oh yeah. So I would like to forget it ever happened, but every so often they like to remind me, the bastards.
Yeah. Well, the next thing's going to be is the Batman making machine that Snyder set up, and then it'll get on my nerves, because I hate that thing more than most things.
Yeah. So, yeah, honestly, it's a good horror issue, because the beings from the 5th dimension look really creepy. It feels like it's, commenting on Gotham as well, because it's talking about the 1%ers and the poor. It's talking about how Gotham's weird and different because it's snowing in July, and how no one even bats an eye at that anymore. Like, it's doing a lot of stuff. And then on top of all that, you've got a demonic version of both him and Batman as being the villain, which is the the fear that they've caused more harm than good, if nothing else, I think. So, yeah, this one's kind of good. Now, like, it doesn't save the event, obviously, but as a standalone thing, like, I'll probably wait to recommend it properly until I know what the second half is like, and then I'd recommend the 2 issues, but issue 1 is very good and very promising, so, yeah. You want to rate it, Matt?
Yeah, 7.5.
Honestly, looking through it again as we talk about it, I think I might even go as high as the 8, which is...
Okay.
Which is basically saying, like, astronomical praise for one of these tie-ins at this point.